The kitchen really is that first interaction that a guest or even you, the homeowner, has with the home. That's what makes it so critical for us to get the detailing right. It starts with the design, but then it really pushes on us to think about pre-construction and how are we going to accomplish the details that have been designed. So let me walk you through how all of this came together. Starting with the floors, we have these boards that are 12 to 18 inches wide. And on the ceiling, we have these box beams. Their spacing is actually really tight. It helps us hide things like the recessed lighting, even some of the fresh air system and the ventilation in the home, but really gave us the opportunity to have this compression of materials where on the floor and ceiling, they were both white oak. From a millwork perspective, it really all ties back to the white oak. And being able to work with someone like Madeira to get all of the white oak from one forest gave us this opportunity to really lean into making the millwork part of the architecture rather than furniture. Because truly all of this white oak is coming from the same place. The flooring very well could be from the same exact log, never mind the same forest, as the veneers that were made for all of our millwork. In building this millwork, we had to take a lot of consideration into things like the tight tolerances or the specific reveals around windows or how it interacted with plaster. And our shop material millwork fabricated all of the cabinetry in the entire home. On the range wall, you have just lower cabinetry that has this vertical grain white oak across the entire length of it, and these panels that are on either end that anchor that run of cabinetry to the floor. And when you look closely, those panels actually return back and are perfectly coordinated with the window openings. And that was a really important detail on how cabinetry and stone interacted with the windows, because it was essentially designing the space as one kind of cohesive unit. On the far right is a built-in bench for the breakfast nook. And that bench was all fabricated as cabinetry. From panel to exterior wall, it ties into the window that's above the bench. Everything is designed to align to have this consistency of height and materials and reveals. Outside, it actually aligns with the exterior cabinetry that we have for our outdoor kitchen. So when you really step back, you actually have this consistent line from the range all the way to the outdoor kitchen. Adjacent to the island in the range wall is this full height white oak paneling. And closest to the window, we actually hid a spice cabinet in there. As we work our way to the left, we have a pivot door which brings you into the pantry, and then adjacent to that is a refrigerator and freezer that's completely built in. All of the millwork in the kitchen space has this custom hardware that we actually designed with If Possible and fabricated in our shop. So it's all this pole hardware that has stainless steel backing plates that we had custom made for the cabinetry for this project specifically. You know, a detail in this kitchen that I think really requires explanation is all of the stone detailing. We end up sourcing all of the marble from Vermont. We worked with New York Stone that actually helped us source that material. And then we worked with IPA out of New Jersey to fabricate everything. And the reason we end up working with those two specifically is they had done a lot of these details, or they were confident in being able to achieve the details that we were looking for specifically. The island is really a centerpiece in this kitchen, as it is in many kitchens. It is entirely wrapped in marble. You have these 8-inch legs that have these chiseled face, and it's really intended to look as though you have this 8-inch thick block holding up the island. And then the countertop itself is over 12 feet long in the island, and the entire edge of that countertop all has to be chiseled. And one of the things that we learned early on is that you run the risk when you're hand chiseling this material of breaking it further than you hope it breaks. So you're taking a lot of risk getting that profile to work all the way around the perimeter of the kitchen, and we were able to accomplish that. But there was one thing that we had to be really considerate of, and it was the coordination to the 4-inch and the 3-inch stone countertops. And what that means is we're not building typical height cabinetry, because if we were, our countertop would be higher than what would be considered comfortable. But since we're building cabinetry in a shorter height, we're not as easily able to install standard appliances. So for example, in the island, we have this 4-inch countertop, which means that we're 2.5 inches lower for a dishwasher to fit into a cabinet than you would typically see. We actually ordered ADA appliances because they're shorter in height. And that allowed us to keep all of our counters at a comfortable height, but have that really thick 4-inch edge that we were going for. And now on the working side of the island, all of the cabinetry doors, including the dishwasher doors, all clad in marble. And one of the things that we had really big concern with was the weight of doing that. If you're adding marble, and even in the full thickness of 3/4 inch, it's still a tremendous amount of weight. So we worked with them and we were able to mill down the marble to just under 1/4 inch and epoxy in a wood door, essentially, to allow us to kind of counteract the concern we had with using a heavier material like marble. That allowed us to treat the doors as a typical cabinet door and use typical cabinet hinges. We have 2 sinks, one in the kitchen and one in the pantry, and both of them are fabricated entirely out of the same material. As you come across the countertop, it miters down into the sink. We have that ledge profile in the kitchen that keeps all the tapware lower than the countertop, so you kind of have a nice natural spot for soap or your cleaning utensils, but still feels as though it's one consistent material. Even the sink basin itself, where we tie in the garbage disposal, everything is all marble, all fabricated, and of course waterproofed. And the sink is actually elevated, so when you're looking at it from the backside, what you would typically see go all the way down the floor is actually kept up off the floor, helping create some of that lightness in the design. Pantry, we did something a little bit different, where the backsplash is completely recessed and flush with the plaster above that ties into the glass shelving, but that backsplash drops down into the sink. So from a coordination standpoint, this is an incredible feat for the entire team to get right. In the pantry, we have wall-mounted tapware where we have the faucet and the controls coming out of the wall. We have a window adjacent to it, and then we have this sink that needs to be not only centered on the tapware, but also aligned with a backsplash that's flush with the plaster above, ties into the window with a perfect reveal, and drops down into the backside of the sink. So what looks like a really simple, clean detail was a really heavy, coordinated detail prior to fabricating, and of course, installation. And the result is this really extra deep sink in the pantry space, which is a detail that I haven't seen before, but I really appreciate and love the way that came together in the pantry. In the kitchen space, we have the backsplash behind the range wall. And this is really one of the moments where you see a lot of the materials all come together. So that backsplash is done with 4 slabs of marble, carefully laid out so it would be a consistent veining, as though when you step back it was one slab of marble for that entire backsplash. But then you are layering on the plaster hood, and then you're interacting with the white oak at the very top where the ceiling is. So when you're looking at that backsplash, everything returns back into the window, and on the left and the right side you have this perfect 3/4 inch gap between the window itself and that stone. Those materials never actually touch, and that's really intentional. We wanted that plaster hood to sit against the marble, but be separated by actually 1.6 millimeters. just so we could really celebrate the plaster separately from the marble. Gives it that opportunity to expand and contract differently and have that nice tiny little shadow gap as though we drew the hood against that backsplash. When it came to cooking for this kitchen, we wanted to make sure that we were working with an appliance that was going to give us the customization that we were looking for. We end up doing 2 Gaggenau ovens, and then on top of that we have an induction cooktop, an electric grill, and an electric griddle. One of the details that I knew would be challenging, but I'm really proud of, is the controls for that cooktop. They're actually built into the 4-inch drop of the marble on the countertop, which is a feat in itself, being able to integrate that into stone. But the way that the fabricator was able to make them fit as though they were always there is really a special moment as you're walking through the kitchen. In a high performance home, ventilation is really important, especially when you're cooking. And when you're exhausting air out of the house, if you're not bringing fresh air in to make up that air, you end up fighting the house, and becomes a real challenge to make sure that the home is being ventilated appropriately. Above the cooktop is this really beautiful handmade plaster hood. Inside the hood is quite technical. We have this really high-powered exhaust fan exhausting the cooking gases from the cooktop. Inside that hood, we actually have the makeup air coming in to balance the house. So what happens is when you're exhausting air, a damper opens up and it allows the fresh air to come through and then into the hood and then drop down on either side of the exhaust. From a technical standpoint, the concern really is that we would short circuit the exhaust. So we actually tested the hood to make sure that we were able to exhaust what is coming off of the cooktop while bringing in that makeup air. But by doing this, we call it this hood within a hood detail, it actually helps simplify the makeup air. And it's something that we've been doing on a lot of our projects where we're not having to temper the makeup air coming in, we're not having to use any fan pulling air, or pressurizing the house. It's a really simple detail that solves a lot of issues, but does the main thing of getting the cooking gases out of the house. We had to be really considerate on the lighting in the kitchen. Lighting is, one of those things that a lot of people get wrong. So for us, we wanted to make sure that we had enough lighting to make sure that the space was bright, with the ability to dim that down when you're not cooking or prepping and you're in more of an intimate setting. And then we also wanted to make sure that we had the ability for adjustable lighting. So above the island, we actually have these custom-made brass monopoints that can be positioned in all these different directions. You can point them directly at the island, or you can point them back at the range. And then above the cooktop, we have integrated lighting within the hood to allow for really bright lighting when you're actually cooking. But during the day, you have these floor-to-ceiling glass windows and doors that flood the space with natural light. Now in the pantry, we have these 3 pivot doors, and they're designed to close that space off when you want that place to be private, or you kind of want to throw your mess in that room and close it off and enjoy yourself in the kitchen. But the doors are designed to be full height, floor to ceiling, and they open up, and that pantry becomes an extension of the kitchen. So we have lower cabinetry and a second dishwasher in this space, another sink. We have a speed oven and then a coffee maker in here. One of the details that's really nice in this space is the glass shelving and that whole back wall. So from a coordination standpoint, we were coordinating stone with plaster with these steel supports in the wall that ultimately hold these really beautiful cast glass shelves that we had made, 1.5 inches thick, almost 6 feet long. They sit on these white oak shelving brackets, but inside that white oak is actually steel, and that steel is designed to hold the shelving weight, but also what goes on these shelves. Across from that is what we call the dry good pantry. So it's another pivot door that when closed, it's totally plastered, but when open, it gives you all of this dry goods storage. So it's still white oak millwork in that space, all coordinated to be the same finish, but gives you a ton of extra storage inside, essentially the pantry of this kitchen. Everything feels as though it was built in and built for this house, because it was. I feel home when I'm in this kitchen. I feel like this is a place that I would spend a lot of time, whether it's coffee in the morning or a chat after work, helping my kids do their homework at the island. It just feels like this is the place that you congregate. This is family space. This is space for everyone. And I love that. Thinking about the detailing early on, working with our trades and our vendors and our contractors to make sure that all of these things are being considered. What is the end goal? That's what allows you to be in a space that you might not notice the details, but you feel them.